Hello and welcome to another Mod of the Month video, taking a look at the best mods released for Morrowind each month. And today we're taking a look at the best mods of March 2019, almost a year after the fact here. We're still playing catch up after the lack of video updates last year, but anyway, let's not dilly-dally in the past, or rather let's, because, that's the entire point of these videos here. And now, March 2019 was a fairly active month for the community, of an estimated 66 new mod releases, including a ton of just high quality and popular mods. So many that just, coming up with a list here for the mod of the month meant leaving out quite a few just high profile mods here. And real quick, I'd like to just highlight two of those mods, which didn't make it into our ranked mod of the month order today, but which nonetheless would have, likely been voted to the top had we, had the time to do a popular vote. And those mods are Vert's Bitter Coast Trees 2, remastered and optimized by Vert and Rytelier, and Easy MCM by Merlord. The first is a just unquestionably superior and really must-have mod for anyone using Vert's Bitter Coast Trees, as it fixes a number of issues with the, the original mod, including collision issues, better optimization, and performance improvements, and some texture fixing. I highly recommend it, and, would strongly suggest anyone who has, Vert's Bitter Coast Trees to just install this as well here. But because there isn't a whole lot, visually speaking, for us to showcase, I thought it would be, just better to give it a shout-out instead of an entire slot of our Mod of the Month episode here. And the same could be said for Easy MCM, which is not really a mod that's easy to showcase. Plus, at this point, it's apparently already been merged into MWSE, so it isn't really a required download anymore. But at the time of its release, Easy MCM just provided a UI library, to allow mod makers to easily make mod configuration menus for their mods, a handy feature for both, modders and players, allowing modders to add greater in-game customization to their mods for players to adjust of easy-to-use mod menus. Again, though, it's already been merged into MWSE, and it's not exactly something that can be easily showcased, hence why it's, isn't in our core list here today. But anyway, moving on, you'll find links down below, including for the two mods that we just mentioned. And now, for that out of the way, let's just move on for our actual mod of the month for March 2019, which this time around is 7 Graces, Shrines, Enhanced by QueenLunara. One of the more just exciting and talented modders to join the Morrowind modding community in 2019. QueenLunara's first, and so far only, Morrowind mod is a rather beautiful and just scenic detail overhaul mod that transforms the 7 shrines that compose the first pilgrimage that, you must take part in as part of the Tribunal Temple questline. As with most aspects involving the vanilla game here, these shrines in vanilla Morrowind were largely bare, boring, and dull affairs, with maybe a store in front of them for pilgrims to pray at, and otherwise a few, if any, signs to bear their religious significance. Even in the heart of Vivek in the temple complex, one would just hardly believe that these shrines had been visited by countless pilgrims before. But that's obviously no longer the case now, as each of these 7 shrines has been wonderfully and beautifully overhauled, with new decorative touches, offerings left by past pilgrims, and just other signs of worship as befit the rather religious nature of the Dunmeri people. These 7 shrines include the Fields of Camus, as you can see here, as well as the Shrine at Ghost Gate, the Puzzle Canal, the Temple Complex in Vivec, and of course the Temple in Nissus. And in some cases, the changes made are just rather minor, as in Nissus, or otherwise blend in fairly well with the rest of the game here, like the Shrine of Humility in the Fields of Camus, or the Shrine of Generosity at the Palace of Vivec. And while other, fanes like Cold Cave have seen a just rather massive transformation, particularly on the exterior here, which you can just, see here. No longer a just unremarkable cave entrance in the West Gash, Cold Cave now has a scenic entrance with banners and atmospheric lighting dangling from the nearby stone arch, and a set of docks right alongside the cave entrance, and just clear signs of a path that past pilgrims have, also trudged through here. And inside Cold Cave, you'll find the Shrine of Valor is just as atmospheric and nicely detailed as the exterior, with some excellent lighting added in to really just enhance the mood of this important place of worship. But by far the most noteworthy and beautiful transformation wrought by this mod is the Puzzle Canal, which has just been completely overhauled and lovingly detailed with some fantastic new atmospheric additions. Now, I don't know if you remember the original Puzzle Canal, but it basically had nothing that you can see here in this video. It was a large, just completely empty room, devoid of all clutter and old detailing. It was a massive and monumental disappointment in vanilla Morrowind, which is perhaps why there's been just so many mods that have overhauled this, part of the game. But there can be no doubt that QueenLunara's version is just absolutely superb, with tons of new details from the partially completed statues of Vivec, to the offerings left by, past pilgrims, and the makeshift gangways, from countless lily pads dotting the central pool of water, to various jagged rocks, just everywhere, to bits of moss clinging to everything. All this has just been added in here, and combined with the atmospheric lighting, makes this just a truly wondrous place to discover after running through the canals of the palace here. To say the least, I really just highly recommend this mod. It's quite beautiful and works really well with the other, temple-themed mods that were released last year, like Passage of Prayers, Velothi Wall Art, Palace of Vivec's Chambers, the Shrine of Mount Sarnabibi, and just so many other great temple mods that were released in 2019. But anyway, all this makes it our mod of the month for March 2019. And moving on, our second pick is the aforementioned Velothi Wall Art by Ashstaar. This is perhaps a rather just serendipitous coincidence that both of these mods came out in the same month, for they rather just complement each other fairly well here, by touching upon various religious and Velothi-related, aspects of the game. But, well, I better not get too carried away here, so let's just move on with what this mod actually does. And as the name implies, this mod adds concept art and artwork to the walls of various Velothi buildings around Morrowind, including tribunal temples like the one in Nissus, as you can see here, and even residential buildings like the homes and towers of the small farming village of Voss. This wall art is all of just a rather distinctly Dunmeri nature, sometimes featuring Daedric words and otherwise depicting figures or scenes of battle or creatures or, you get the idea here. There's just a ton of new art here, and you'll see it spread across much of Ardenfell, just, wherever a Velothi building is. But by far the largest concentration of this art is to be found in the plazas of the cantons of Vivec, lining the walls of the houses, shops, guilds, taverns, and great house embassies, as you can, again, just, see here. It simply cannot be understated how much just variety is in the artwork here. And while it might seem like a relatively just minor cosmetic element, it really does just add that extra atmospheric touch to the game that just enhances unique Dunmeri and Velothi cultures of Morrowind. There's just, something about walking through a temple city like Vivek and, seeing the sort of graffiti and art painted along the, buildings here. It just adds a sense of vitality and life to the game. A bit of just realism. After all, there's just one constant with civilization. It's the desire to create art, or to express opinions, or advertisements, or proclaim religious beliefs with graffiti, using the walls of a city as a canvas to engage and connect with others. And it helps that this is all just, fantastic artwork that, of course, fits in perfectly with the rest of the game here. And I know, I'm rambling a bit here, but, this is just another just really fantastic mod by Ashstaar, and one that deserves to be played, hence why it's our second pick for the mod of the month. And finally, for our third pick for the mod of the month, we have Aesthesia, Stronghold Textures by Rytelier. And, well, this is quite obviously a texture replacer for the Dunmeri Strongholds of Morrowind, and it was one of quite a few, graphic replacer mods to be released in March. And many of them were just high-quality replacers, but, we only have the 3 slots here. And this is just, one of only a handful of modern Dunmeri Stronghold retexture mods to, be released in recent times. And as with all the mods in the Aesthesia series, this replacer provides new, high-resolution 2K textures to replace the somewhat dated textures in the vanilla game, though much like the other Aesthesia mods that, Rytelier has released, this is still a very much, vanilla-friendly replacer, designed to blend in with the game and just, keep the original color scheme and style of the vanilla textures here. And without question, this is a really nice and scenic replacer for, this just often overlooked tile set, as indeed there isn't a huge number of Stronghold retextures out there. There's been only 2, I think, other replacer packages for Dunmeri Strongholds that have been released in the last 6 years, beyond his replacer, which isn't exactly very vanilla-friendly, and a replacer by Ramiros, which is, a much more just vanilla-style replacer, but with a decidedly lighter, color scheme, and it's just, it's fairly bright. But anyway, it's just, it's nice to have another option to choose from when, it comes to the Stronghold tile set. And just checking out some interiors with these new textures applied, it really is just a great replacer here that, looks pretty good, regardless of what type of, Morrowind graphics install you have set up. And either way, it's certainly worth checking out, and, that makes it our third and final pick for the mod of the month here. But, well, that's the end of our video here, and once again, links are below. And just as a reminder, we'll have another one of our just year behind mod of the month videos in a week or 2. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.